a variety of NHL news and rumors to discuss today, including some further updates from Kyle Dubas on the Mitch Marner and Jake Gardiner situations. Plus, I also want to discuss Niklas Kronwall's retirement, and we have several PTOs to discuss as well. We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. We have a lot of variety of news and rumors from around the NHL. And first of all, I want to get started with Patrick Marleau, who apparently will not be having a reunion with the San Jose Sharks. Now, of course, as we know, he's played the last couple of years with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Earlier this offseason, he accepted a trade to go to the Carolina Hurricanes, who ultimately bought him out of the final year of his contract, making him an unrestricted free agent. Many people around the hockey world kind of thought that would pave the way for him to return to San Jose, have a reunion with the Sharks, maybe for one last run on a one-year deal. We know that he recently moved his family back to San Jose into the California area as well. So clearly that looked as though the way things were heading, but we did have an update yesterday from NHL insider Pierre LeBrun, who had touched base with Patrick Marleau's agent Pat Brisson, who had indicated that they were actually informed quite some time ago, back in July, that there was no longer a fit for Marleau in San Jose, that they did not want to take away playing time from their younger players to bring back another veteran like Marleau into the fold. And of course, if there was no update on Joe Thornton or anybody else that could be signed by the Sharks, they do have some cap space. Many believe Thornton will likely sign another one-year contract, but that's also yet to happen as well. Not quite sure how that's going to go, but it would not be surprising to find out that Doug Wilson, as I mentioned the other day, likely could be working on some other moves. Maybe Thornton's kind of waiting to sit back and see how everything goes. Maybe on the evening before training camp opens or something to that effect, we'll see Thornton sign a short-term, maybe like a one-year veteran contract or something to that effect. But either way, Patrick Marleau will not be returning to the Sharks. We do have confirmation of that. There is believed to be interest from teams like the Edmonton Oilers and the Arizona Coyotes, who would be interested in maybe signing the winger to a one-year veteran type of contract, maybe 1 year, $1 million, or maybe less, who knows. But either way, there is some interest, but the soon-to-be 40-year-old player does want to continue playing. Just a matter of finding what team was willing to sign him. Well, obviously, he'd probably prefer to play in the West so he could be as close to home as possible. But I guess we'll remain to be seen where and if Marleau plays this year, but we know for sure it will not be as a member of the San Jose Sharks. Now, I meant to include this in yesterday's video as well, but longtime Detroit Red Wing defenseman Niklas Kronwall has announced his retirement from the NHL. Kronwall made the announcement in a video with the Red Wings on their social media accounts just in the last day or so. Certainly had a pretty solid career. He is now going to join the front office and be an advisor to GM Steve Yzerman. So he's going to be remaining with the Red Wings organization, still working in the hockey world. Of course, he's been there for a long time. So obviously, they'll take advantage of what expertise he can bring to the table and see what he can mold him into for a future leader. Many guys get into that type of role, kind of feeling things out as an executive in the NHL once they retire, if they feel that's the career path that they want to take next. So we'll see what happens, but obviously Kronwall was a very serviceable defenseman for many years for Detroit, played a big role, was known for throwing out his big hits. Certainly wasn't a big offensive star, but he was solid in his own end and certainly played a big role in that team, was a great leader for a long time as well. So I did want to acknowledge the retirement and just mention how he did have a solid career, and best of luck to him in his next role here as he moves on with the Red Wings in the front office. Now, we also had another restricted free agent signing come later yesterday after yesterday's video was posted. The LA Kings and forward Adrian Kempe came to terms on a 3-year contract at a value of $2 million per season. Now, like many guys that go into the NHL, Kempe had a pretty solid rookie campaign, but did regress and have a bit of a sophomore slump last year. But then again, the whole team did. 2 years ago, we saw the Kings make the playoffs only to be swept by the Golden Knights, but their regular season was actually pretty decent. Obviously, getting into the playoffs is not easy, and they were good enough to do that. But then last year, they really took major steps back, really bottomed out. And Kempe, like many of the guys around the team, his stats did suffer because of that. So I do think this short-term bridge contract is pretty fair for a guy like Kempe. I think he still has a lot of potential. And being a younger guy in the team could certainly still be part of their rebuild that they're starting to go through here now. But the Kings rebuild is not going to be easy because they do have a lot of aging veterans that are tied to long-term contracts and may not be easy to move even if the player and the team decided that it was mutually beneficial. So we'll see what happens with LA, but either way, I do like the contract for Kempe. I think it's more than fair, and we can scratch one more RFA off the list here of guys yet to be signed, but as we know, many of the top guys we're waiting on are still in that unsigned category. The Calgary Flames have announced they've invited a variety of veterans to training camp on professional tryout agreements, including former Stanley Cup champion Devontae Smith-Pelly, who was recently with the Washington Capitals. Of course, there's also invited former Edmonton Oiler and Arizona Coyote Toby Reeder, as well as Zach Ronaldo and Alex Grenier as well. So they're certainly going to have a variety of guys there in training camp, plus some of their younger players and kind of battling out for spots. It'll be interesting to see if any of them catch on. It is possible that they could very well end up on two-way contracts, maybe play for the American Hockey League affiliate. That's also a possibility as well. But as I've mentioned with other guys too, just getting themselves into a training camp on a tryout, which means they likely get some action in the preseason games. If they play well, there's certainly going to be other scouts, other GMs taking notice, even if they don't get a contract with the team they're playing for during training camp. That very well could still lead to other opportunities shortly thereafter. So I guess we will see, but nice to see some of these veteran guys get another opportunity. I mean, I know Devontae Smith-Pelly was a playoff hero just a few years back, helping the Caps win a Stanley Cup, but he's certainly been plagued by inconsistent issues, and I know last year there was some talk about him not being in great shape going into training camp, etc. So we'll see if he can make the most of this opportunity with the Flames organization. Now, speaking of professional tryouts, nothing here is official yet, and it may not even lead to anything, but former Boston Bruins defenseman Adam McQuaid has been skating in the Boston area with many of his old teammates. Now, there has been some speculation that maybe the Bruins are interested in bringing him back either on a contract or on a PTO to training camp, and I really wouldn't make too much of that just yet. Adam McQuaid, of course, played for the Bruins for quite a long time, has a lot of friends there, and is still known to spend at least part of his offseason in the summer in the Boston area. So clearly it could just be a case of him skating with old friends, trying to stay in shape and get ready for the upcoming season, hoping to take advantage of any opportunities that come his way. At the same time, though, you can't help but wonder if the Bruins might go down the road of offering him a PTO, considering at this point at least they still do not have Charlie McAvoy and Brandon Carlo signed. They have some other injuries on that blue line. They did bring in defenseman Alex Petrovic on a PTO, and having more than enough capable bodies there to potentially take position certainly would not be a bad thing for Boston. So it could possibly lead to something, but just because he's skating with the Bruins, I don't think we should jump to any conclusions just yet. Of course, as we know as well, Kyle Dubas, the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, has been making his rounds doing all kinds of media-related appearances over the last day or two as well. We've seen him do an interview with TSN's Bob McKenzie, talk to Pierre LeBrun. He was on Tim and Sid on Sportsnet. Now he's got an interview posted today in the Toronto Sun as well with Lance Hornsby, and there's certainly a few other things that came out of that interview that I thought was worth mentioning here. One, we found out that Garrett Wilson, another player that they brought in as a free agent this offseason, likely will miss training camp and may not be able to participate in any preseason action. He did suffer a hamstring injury, which I imagine was likely during his offseason training or something to that effect, but either way, he is starting training camp injured and likely won't be able to participate, so they really won't be able to get a good look and feel for where he may fit within the team during that time, but he is expected to be healthy and ready and able to play by the time the season actually opens here in October. So I guess we'll see what that means for him, but obviously there's a lot of guys that they brought in on short-term cheap contracts in the forward position to round out their bottom six. Some of those guys could very well end up playing in the AHL as well, so not quite clear, but either way, we did learn about an injury there for Wilson that we were not quite yet aware of. One of the questions as well posed by Lance Hornsby to Kyle Dubas as well indicated that at one point not long ago, Dubas apparently said that there were means for them to sign Mitch Marner before the season started, that they did not have to use the LTIR for guys like Clarkson and Horton in order to fit him in under the salary cap. His response is as follows. It says, there are a number of ways. The question was, do we have to wait until the beginning of the regular season to sign him? And that answer would be no. Without getting into the minutiae of it, say tomorrow before camp there's a breakthrough, there will be no delay in getting Mitch here. Now, Hornsby also followed that up with another question regarding Leaf defenseman, or potentially former Leaf defenseman, Jake Gardiner, where he asked, you've hinted there's a chance Jake Gardiner returns, though it clearly would take some cap maneuvering. His answer is, because of the quality of person Jake is, until he's locked in elsewhere, the door will never be closed here. So clearly, as I discussed here yesterday and a few other times throughout the offseason, I would not rule out a potential return of Jake Gardiner to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I do think there's mutual interest on both sides, and I would not be surprised at all to find out that this handshake agreement that many NHL insiders feel is between Gardiner and the Leafs. But of course, there has to be some kind of expectation that it's not a guarantee to make it happen, but that he wants to wait until the absolutely last moment here to see if a return is possible before he signs and commits to going anywhere ourselves. It very well could mean Gardner accepting a 1-year contract with the Maple Leafs. Pretty much everybody on that Blue Line's contract expires this year outside of Morgan Rielly, and they might have more flexibility to decide who's going to be a part of that Blue Line in the future beyond the coming year, next offseason, and maybe a different kind of a deal could be worked out if the Leafs and Gardner both want to continue having him as part of the organization. So certainly would not rule it out. In regards to Mitch Marner, obviously the LTIR way to get him under the cap makes the most sense. The only other thing that would really make sense would be some type of trade to free up some additional cap space. Obviously teams are allowed to go over the cap by up to 10% during the offseason, but by October 2nd when the season starts, clearly they're going to have to be cap compliant, and I just don't really see any other way around it outside of using the LTIR, considering how big of a contract Marner likely is to sign when it finally does happen. So I guess we'll see what happens. Maybe the Leafs are working on some other trades in the background, and if they can get Marner signed sooner than later, depending on what that final number is going to be, maybe they are prepared to move some other players out to bring Marner and Gardner back, which I've discussed here before, saying that, I would not be surprised at all to see that happen, but I guess we'll see. There's still no further updates on the Marner contract situation. The latest update that we discussed yesterday was a 3-year deal, around $9.5 million is what was rumored out there, put out there by TSN's Darren Dreger. As we know, Dreger seems to be having an inside track with the Marner camp between his agent and family, so we'll see how much of this information turns out to be accurate once something is finally done here on the Mitch Marner situation. But obviously it does look like it's still holding up some other contracts around the league. But having Clayton Keller signed yesterday at an 8-year deal at $7.15 million is definitely going to have an impact here on this RFA market as well. I don't think it's really going to impact Marner per se, but some of the other RFAs around the league that we're waiting on, like a guy like Brock Besser, for example, or even Matthew Tkachuk, they're probably looking at their totals, their point productions, and what they've been able to score for goals, and comparing that to Keller. Now, that could be a game changer, and I know Chayka is real fond of those long-term deals to get them signed early before their production really goes up high, but at the same time, like I said yesterday too, I think there's a lot of risk to that Keller deal, and it's going to have a big impact on the current RFA market, just because most of the RFAs that were waiting to be signed are more established, better players at this point in their careers at least than Clayton Keller is. So they're looking at that saying, well, he got $7 million. That makes my number a little bit higher now. So it might not have a positive impact at all on this logjam. It could make things even more tough on these teams to get these players signed. But hopefully, over the next week or two here, as training camps begin to open, we'll have everything all lined up, and most of these guys hopefully will not miss time, because that would not be good for business for the NHL. That is all your latest NHL news and rumors and talk for today. Of course, as always, want all your thoughts and opinions and everything we discussed down in the comment section. Let me know what you think, and we'll continue the conversation in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications as well, so you don't miss any future videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.